TIL that lesbians experienced higher rates of domestic assault than straight women, with over 67 of assaulted lesbians reporting exclusively female perpetrators. The most intense fights I ever heard living in LA apartments was between two lesbians who routinely beat the shit out of each other in their paper-thin wall 200 square foot studio apartment. One night one of them was repeatedly telling "call the police" over and over, so I called the police. I think they dipped out before the cops showed, but 2 weeks later they had an eviction notice on their door. It was downright frightening. Few years later I had another lesbian couple neighbor and they were super friendly, quiet, and cooked wicked barbecue. I liked them way better. Might be anecdotal, but my experience with women is that women expect and are given a lot more forgiveness and don't even notice when they do a behavior that, if a man did to them, would be considered abusive. From just toxic behavior to sexual harassment, including women doing this to kids. Not saying women are more violent or prone abusing others. When a man shouts at a woman or gropes them, he's a scum of the earth. When a woman does that to a man, she's just having a bad day or is being funny. I'd suggest the book In the Dream House, by Carmen Maria Machado for those who want a very detailed look at how abuse in a lesbian relationship can slip through the cracks for those who know the couple. I read it all in one day, and felt such immense sorrow for the author. The complexity and control that they experienced was surprising, and more writing awareness needs to be done around this topic. I honestly wonder if it's the difference in definitions. Like, my brother's best friend punched him square in the face when they were teenagers, and they're still besties. They'd probably describe it as a disagreement among friends. But someone else might describe it as a brutal beating. But yeah, women are probably more willing to throw down with each other due to being physically matched. I wonder if the rate of serious injury is any different. This is slightly misleading. They are why I am more likely to report domestic assault than straight couples. That doesn't necessarily mean they also face higher rates of it of press. There's a testing bias in place here. Kinda like how the more you test for COVID the more positive results you will have. But the amount you test doesn't actually change the amount of people you have COVID. Or the whole 3.6 reagan was a number that kinda thing. Makes sense. Women tend to initiate violence a lot more than men emo, it just gets ignored because they are just women, or because it's embarrassing for the man, or because even the man writes off the thumb because it didn't hurt them that much. This is only because society enables it more for women implicitly, though so some toxic women they feel like they can get away with it. Meanwhile most men know they'll cause damage. 44 of lesbians have experienced domestic violence, of which 67 was at the hands of exclusively female perpetrators. This means roughly 30 of domestic violence incidents involving lesbians were perpetrated by a female. This compares to 35 for heterosexual women, of which 99 is from a male. So still higher for males. However, I am confused about the lesbian relationships that have male assault perpetrators. I met a girl on a dating app who was in an open relationship because her girlfriend didn't have sex, so we got together one afternoon and after about 30 minutes her girlfriend was blowing up her phone and the screaming phone calls. She left and then called to see if she could crash, but we'd already had sex and I didn't want any part of their domestic violence, so I said no. This is quite the narrative buster. Men simply don't report DV on women, so they appear to be less violent than men. Once two chicks are involved, that's when you see DV reports skyrocket because they don't just get to beat up on a man with zero fear of consequences. Turns out, women are just as fucked up and nasty as men are. Time to take them off the pedestal. A lot of men can't tell what domestic violence is when it happens to them. They can describe what happened, but a lot of times it doesn't click that they're been assaulted. It's pretty common on certain subreddits. People have to spell it out. I think men's domestic assault numbers are just as underreported as women's because of lack of education. The only shooting I've ever seen was at a gay after hours in Detroit. A group of lesbians came in and were trouble from the start. They eventually started a huge fight and were all thrown out while me and my friend were outside about to leave, and I saw one pulled out a small pistol and start shooting at another group that were tuning from them. There's also a potential factor that women in a lesbian relationship might be more willing to report the assaults, compared to women in straight relationships. Either for not being as afraid of lethal retaliation, or for not suffering so much from conservative peer pressure and maintaining their family image. Women commit domestic assault at higher rates than men, but men's domestic assaults are more violent. This is a standard sex discrepancy. For example, women's suicide attempts rates are higher than men's, but men succeed in committing suicide at higher rates because they chose more violent and sure methods. The article you posted cites these sources which do not support what you've written in the post title. Where did you find your figure? And before, not all lesbians booed. I personally have met more mean lesbians than the normal, well-adjusted kind. Lol. I think women believe they can get away with more violence in the eyes of the law, and they're not wrong really. I don't think anyone other than the victims take it seriously. I think most boys are taught hitting is not okay, especially not hitting girls. I'm not sure girls get that training. I've been hit by 2 women girls in my life. I've never been hit by a guy. However, I recognize that when men do turn violent, it is often much more severe. I'm sorry, but that just makes sense. 67 of assaulted lesbians reported female perpetrator. I mean, if it's domestic, and they're lesbian, they're usually living with another female. Of course the perpetrator is likely to be female. What even is this title? This has been the case for years, but it doesn't get reported. I've worked in top-level female sports and they very often fall in love and move in together very quickly. They often joke about how quickly they get together, move in, and then break up. Dated a therapist who told me that lesbian relationships she treated were by far the most toxic and abuse was very common, whereas male homosexual relationship issues she dealt with were basically the same as heterosexual relationship issues. Once 2 chicks are involved, that's when you see DV reports skyrocket because they don't just get to beat up on a man with zero fear of consequences. Men simply don't report DV on women, so they appear to be less violent than men. One thing I'd be curious about: how abuse is defined for this study. Is it possible that a lot more heterosexual men would be defined as abused if we held the way they were treated to the same standard we did for lesbians? Women are more violent towards their partners. They don't have strength to do damage or seriously hurt men, and that's why men usually let it go as a joke. Obviously in lesbian relationships it's gonna be a lot more prominent. I mean, anyone who's been in a relationship know how physical women can be. It just gets looked over because they aren't as proficient at it as men and it doesn't get reported. So imagine double that in one relationship. Love how every time someone tries to bring this subject up to spread awareness and encourage lesbian victims of DV to speak up, it just instantly gets overran with misogyny and homophobia instead. Great job guys! Reported cases are not the same as total actual cases. There's just more reluctance to report it in traditional marriages where the man is the sole breadwinner or if there are children in the marriage. If interested in seeing a bit of perspective on this, I highly recommend In the Dream House by Carmen Maria Machado. It's an amazing memoir about the author dealing with her abusive relationship. A very good lesbian friend said to me, a man would punch you in the face during a fight, but a lesbian will punch you in the heart and put clear ghost pepper sauce in your maxi pad. There is a ton of violent, explosive women, it just goes unreported, and hetero couples and males deal with it. They know they're the one going to prison even if they are being assaulted. If I had a nickel for every lesbian I knew that tried to run over their girlfriend with a car, I'd have 2 nickels. That's not a lot of nickels, but it's weird it happened twice. My high school chem teacher used to tell us in her decades of assigning pair assignments, every year there was a group that couldn't get along and it always a pair of girls. It's a shame that people in the comments are defaulting to being misogynistic and homophobic. But it is Reddit, so I don't know what I had my hopes up for. Way to be predictable. Are we sure this isn't some form of survivorship bias? One possible reason why this is the case is because heterosexual women might feel less inclined to report their husbands. Women can get very violent. Men are just stronger. Most men can easily overpower a female partner. Meanwhile, that large strength gap doesn't exist in lesbian relationships. One of my local pubs has a table of regulars who happen to be mostly lesbian. The rest are FTM. This table is also referred to as the drama table. Wait. You are telling me that 2 women trying to be in a relationship tends to have more drama than 2 men? I don't believe it. Always take statistics with a grain of salt. They obviously didn't ask every couple in the country, and a lot of cases aren't ever reported. Most, if not almost all men, don't report domestic violence. Somehow we don't want to see it. And there's a lot of psychological abuse too. I worked at a gay bar for some years and I swear the fights were always started by lesbians. Lesbians enjoy fighting. Why? Could it be because women in lesbian relationships are likelier to report violence than women in straight relationships? I've met too many angry, bossy lesbians. Never seen them beat on each other physically, but this stat is not a surprise. If gays want to get married and be miserable like the rest of us, I say we should let them. 2000s Peter Griffin. I will guess it's because women are just as violent in hetero relationships, but the men don't report it as much. I have lived next to lesbian couples 2 times. Very violent fights. Took it outside. I did not expect that. This sounds like an American anti-LGBT post, but I'm too weary of this nonsense to look anymore. Now imagine what the real numbers for assaults of women on men in their relations might be like. The good don't seem to be living up to their title anymore. They're more like les miserables. This is fascinating and completely unexpected to me. I wonder why this is the case. Imagine 2 women living together and having the period around the same time. Is war. This is sort of like a well-known stat in some circles but not polite to mention. 67 of assaulted lesbians report it being from females. Well, no shit Sherlock. What if I told you heterosexual relationships also have abused men? Shocker. Almost makes you wonder how many men overlooked don't report domestic abuse. Go work EMS in West Hollywood. Gay people beat the shit out of each other. That's unfortunate, but it's something their community needs to work out. Makes sense. I've never hit a woman, but I've been hit by multiple women. Kind of makes you think of all the unreported assaults against men. Coincidentally also have the highest divorce rates of any group. I call bullshit and argue lesbians are more likely to report it. Toxic masculine. Oh. Wait. What happened to my narrative?